The bustling city lights glimmered like fallen stars, setting the stage for a dinner destined to change lives forever. David Huntington, a self-made millionaire known for bold business moves, arrived at La Chanson with his new girlfriend, Clarissa Myers. They exuded confidence, drawing every gaze. Yet beneath the glamour lay hidden truths poised to erupt. Little did they know behind the gilded doors awaited David's pregnant ex-wife, Rebecca. One chance encounter would spark a chain of revelations, forcing them to confront heartbreak, regrets, and life-altering choices they could never have anticipated. David Huntington's ascent to wealth had been as remarkable as it was fraught with personal sacrifice. Raised by a single mother in the modest town of Fairview Springs, he learned from a young age that life rarely offered handouts. Fueled by a hunger for success, David tinkered with old computers at 15, taught himself to code at 16, and launched his first small-scale startup by 19. While it didn't make him rich overnight, it kindled an unquenchable thirst for bigger dreams. Yet as David's ambitions grew, so did the friction in his personal life. His high school sweetheart Rebecca had once been his most devoted supporter. Initially, she was enthralled by his boundless energy standing beside him at local tech fairs or helping him gather data for market research. They married fresh out of high school, convinced that their love would conquer any obstacle. In those early days, Rebecca was both cheerleader and confidant. But the frantic pace of entrepreneurship soon took its toll. David spent countless nights glued to his desk, immersed in code-charting financial projections and courting investors. Rebecca watched, both proud and anxious, as David's star began to rise. The deals rolled in, wealth accumulated, and with each milestone, his focus on work intensified. The dinners they once shared grew infrequent. Spontaneous weekend getaways vanished, replaced by conferences and late-night Skype calls. Rebecca felt the growing gulf between them, but David always promised he would make it up after the next major deal. Those promises dissolved when more opportunities emerged, dragging him further into a world she barely recognized. Tension festered. Rebecca felt like a stranger in her own marriage. She tried to reignite the spark, planning date nights, cooking special meals. But David dismissed these gestures as distractions from his goals. He would wave her off, certain that she simply didn't understand the sacrifice required to build an empire. Bit by bit, Rebecca's patience wore thin. The turning point arrived when David finalized a lucrative partnership worth 8 figures. Rather than sharing that moment of triumph with Rebecca, he spent the entire night on calls with potential overseas collaborators, eyeing even grander ventures. Feeling invisible, she decided she couldn't endure it anymore. In the early hours, she packed a suitcase and left a brief note. "I can't do this anymore, David." In the subsequent weeks, David attempted to salvage the marriage, making apologetic phone calls and sending flowers. But Rebecca stood firm. She believed their relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. The divorce process was surprisingly straightforward. Rebecca took a modest settlement and walked away wanting no further entanglements. Gossip circulated that she was leaving a fortune on the table, but close friends understood she simply craved independence and peace. Little did David know that when Rebecca left, she had already begun to suspect she was pregnant. Fearful and overwhelmed, she chose to keep the news to herself. Their marriage was in shambles, and she didn't want him suspecting her of using the pregnancy as leverage. She resolved to handle it alone, hoping for clarity on whether she should inform him or not. In time, it became easier to remain silent, reluctant to pull David back into a life where he'd become so emotionally absent. Meanwhile, David charged forward with his newfound freedom, plunging deeper into business ventures. As success piled on success, his name began to frequent the pages of tech journals. It was at a charity gala in San Francisco that he met the radiant Clarissa Myers. A former model turned philanthropist, she dazzled with poise and passion, easily holding her own amid society's upper crust. Their connection was immediate. Clarissa appreciated David's assertiveness, and David found her vivacity refreshing after years of tension with Rebecca. In the early days of their relationship, everything seemed blissful. Clarissa accompanied David to upscale events, business openings, and high-profile dinners. She basked in the attention while David delighted in her easy laughter and social finesse. Where Rebecca had been more reserved, Clarissa thrived in the spotlight. She had her own ambitions too. Her philanthropic projects were gaining traction. David loved her independence, viewing it as a healthier dynamic compared to his past marriage. Still beneath the charm, Clarissa battled moments of insecurity. She worried about her public image, wondering whether she measured up to the demands of David's fast-paced world. However, beneath Clarissa's polished exterior lay her own set of insecurities. She relished being with a powerful man, but found that the role of tech mogul's girlfriend carried pressures, media scrutiny, social expectations, and the unspoken rule of prioritizing David's schedule. Clarissa, accustomed to spotlight and admiration, hoped to maintain her own identity. Yet she wanted to prove she wasn't just an ornament on David's arm. Their relationship was passionate, but an undercurrent of tension simmered, rooted in her desire for recognition and David's unrelenting drive. One evening, David decided to treat Clarissa to an upscale dinner at the newly acclaimed La Chanson, an establishment drawing celebrities and moguls alike. He spared no expense arranging a limousine stocked with champagne. Clarissa, draped in a glamorous evening gown, reveled in the attention from passers-by and the flash of cameras. The couple entered the restaurant, walking into an ambiance of subdued lighting and gentle piano melodies. They were escorted to a private table in the corner, each anticipating an intimate evening. Moments later, a female server approached, menu in hand. She froze upon meeting David's gaze. He felt the blood drain from his face. The server was none other than Rebecca, wearing the restaurant's black uniform. Her features etched with shock and a pregnant belly that was impossible to miss under her apron. Time seemed to halt. Clarissa, oblivious to the full backstory, sensed the tension and regarded David curiously. Rebecca's eyes brimmed with emotions: anger, confusion, sadness. She barely managed a courteous greeting, confirming she had just started working there. David stared at her swollen abdomen, a tide of conflicting feelings, guilt, concern, perhaps a ray of hope washing over him. Clarissa noticed David's pallor. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice not to quiver. "That's my ex-wife," he muttered. A stunned silence fell. Clarissa tried to maintain composure, but her mind raced with questions. David struggled to piece together his own thoughts. How could Rebecca be carrying his child without his knowledge? Why was she working as a server in a fancy restaurant? The evening that had promised luxury now teetered on the brink of emotional collapse. Rebecca returned briefly to take their orders, her hand trembling. Clarissa placed hers politely, though her curiosity was clear. David opted for the daily special without glancing at the menu, too overwhelmed to think about food. As Rebecca hurried away, his mind churned. He was furious at having been kept in the dark and remorseful that his neglect might have driven her to this. When Rebecca disappeared into the kitchen, Clarissa leaned forward. "You never mentioned she was pregnant," she said, her voice wavering between concern and accusation. David shook his head. I didn't know. The next few minutes were fraught with tension as they waited uncertain of how to proceed. The romantic warmth of La Chanson's candlelight felt jarringly at odds with the raw storm brewing at their table. David eventually excused himself, ignoring Clarissa's plea to let things settle. He found Rebecca near the kitchen, where servers bustled about. Softly, he called her name. She turned, arms crossed over her apron. A swirl of old hurts and new anxieties swirled between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, voice hushed. She looked away. "We weren't exactly talking. I found out after I left. I was terrified you'd think I was using the baby to get back at you." His heart clenched. He wanted to demand answers, to ask if she needed financial help. But the restaurant staff was beginning to notice the drama. The head chef barked Rebecca's name, and she had to go. David returned to the table feeling hollow. Clarissa stared, waiting. "It's mine," he managed. "She's about 6 months along." Clarissa's eyes widened. "What does this mean for us?" David couldn't answer. Confusion, guilt, and protectiveness toward Rebecca all vied for control. They rushed through a few bites of their entrees, the food tasting like ash in David's mouth. Clarissa discreetly paid the bill online, and they slipped out, chased by the camera flashes of a local tabloid reporter. The next few days were a haze. David wrestled with unanswered questions. Had Rebecca been struggling alone financially? Was she safe? How was her health? He reached out to mutual acquaintances, but discovered Rebecca had severed most social ties. Clarissa tried to be supportive, though anxiety gnawed at her. The tabloids had begun to swirl with rumors, speculating whether David would return to his ex-wife or remain with Clarissa. Clarissa found herself in a painful limbo. She liked her life with David, but feared that a baby on the way might rekindle old bonds. Despite her worries, she urged David to track Rebecca down and talk things through. "You have to figure out where you stand," she insisted. David knew she was right. He needed clarity, not just for himself, but for Rebecca and their unborn child. That evening he returned to La Chanson alone. There she was again, glancing nervously in his direction. She approached him after her shift near the alley behind the restaurant, wary of prying eyes. He stepped toward her gently. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I had no clue." Tears glistened as she admitted she had struggled with whether or not to tell him. "I didn't want you to think I was trapping you. You barely noticed me when we were married. How would you notice me now?" Guilt lashed him. "That was on me," he said. "I messed up. But I don't want you to go through this alone. Let me help." He offered financial support, medical care, anything she needed. She hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Ultimately, she agreed to let David attend doctor's appointments, though she remained cautious. Clarissa, waiting in David's penthouse, listened as he recounted the alley conversation. "I want to step up," he told her. "This baby deserves a father." Clarissa nodded, trying to mask her apprehension. She admired his resolve, yet a kernel of doubt nagged her. Would she be sidelined by the re-emergence of Rebecca? Over the ensuing weeks, the three of them settled into an uneasy dance. David took time off from his hectic schedule to attend Rebecca's prenatal visits. He was determined to prove he wouldn't repeat his past mistakes. While relieved by his involvement, Rebecca guarded her emotions. She had once loved David fiercely and paid the price for his indifference. Still, their child's future mattered more than old resentments. Meanwhile, gossip magazines refused to let the story die. Some speculated that David might end up reconciling with Rebecca for the baby's sake. Others painted Clarissa as a glamorous interloper soon to be sidelined. Clarissa did her best to ignore the rumors, focusing on her philanthropic endeavors. Yet late at night, she would confide in David about her fears. Each time he reassured her that his commitment to their relationship was genuine. Still, the tension lingered, an unspoken question of whether David and Rebecca might rekindle their old flame. That evening he drove to La Chanson alone. The ambiance inside remained hushed, the clink of fine china mingling with subdued conversation. He spotted Rebecca bustling between tables. When her shift ended, she joined him in the corner booth. Their discussion began tensely. Both were aware of eyes on them. David lowered his voice, thanking her for allowing him into the pregnancy process. He also offered to help financially, so she could reduce her workload. Rebecca agreed, albeit reluctantly, acknowledging that a high-stress job on her feet all day might not be best for the baby. Finally, David said, "I had no idea." "I'm sorry, Rebecca." She blinked back, tears, exhaustion lining her face. "I appreciate it. Really, but we have to move slowly." David nodded, relieved she was open to co-parenting. They parted on terms more hopeful than before, though, still clouded by unresolved feelings. Clarissa, waiting at the penthouse, felt her heart pound as he returned. How did it go? He explained that Rebecca had allowed him to cover medical bills and rent in a safer neighborhood. Clarissa forced a supportive smile, though she secretly worried about how intertwined David and Rebecca were becoming. Before long, the due date approached. Rebecca's doctor recommended cutting back hours to avoid complications. David seized the chance to assist further, ensuring her bills were paid and encouraging her to rest. She protested that she didn't want charity, but he insisted it was for the baby. Rebecca capitulated, telling herself it was a temporary measure. Then the day came. Rebecca went into labor, calling David in a panic. He dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Clarissa stayed behind, initially unsure if her presence would add more stress. Hours passed as David remained by Rebecca's side, holding her hand through contractions. All the bitterness of their past seemed to fade in the face of new life. At 2:14 a.m., their daughter Lily was born. Tears streamed down David's cheeks as he cut the umbilical cord, awestruck by a love he had never felt. Clarissa heard the news and arrived at the hospital soon after. Peeking into the room, she saw David cradling Lily, while Rebecca slept. She hesitated, feeling like an intruder on an intimate family moment. David noticed and invited her in. She approached timidly, marveling at Lily's tiny fingers. In that moment, her heart brimmed with conflicting emotions: wonder, fear, and a hint of envy. She wanted to be a part of David's life, but this baby bound him to Rebecca in a way she could never fully share. The days that followed were both joyous and nerve-wracking. David juggled business meetings with hospital visits, determined not to repeat the mistakes that had ended his marriage. He helped Rebecca bring Lily home, stocked her apartment with baby supplies, and arranged for an on-call nurse for the first 2 weeks. Rebecca, grateful yet overwhelmed, alternated between admiration for David's sudden devotion and lingering mistrust. Meanwhile, Clarissa struggled with her new role. She adored Lily, yet she worried about being sidelined like a supporting actress in David's family drama. David threw himself into fatherhood with gusto. He read parenting blogs, woke for late-night feedings whenever Rebecca would allow him, and even boasted to his colleagues about Lily's every milestone. The media, as usual, turned it into a spectacle. Paparazzi snapped photos of David exiting Rebecca's apartment, weaving narratives of a rekindled romance. Clarissa found herself the subject of speculation. Would she stay or go now that Rebecca and Lily were in the picture? David tried to reassure her often. He made clear that while he would always care for Rebecca as the mother of his child, his heart belonged to Clarissa. Yet he couldn't deny the flickers of nostalgia whenever he was around Rebecca, remembering their earlier dreams of a family. Rebecca, too, felt echoes of what they once had, though she believed too much pain lay in the past to fully trust him again. Without warning, tensions flared one evening when David attempted to host a casual dinner at Rebecca's place, hoping to normalize the situation. Clarissa arrived with a gift for Lily, trying to make a good impression. But a stray remark about child support set Rebecca off. She accused Clarissa of meddling while Clarissa insisted she was only being considerate. David, stuck in the middle, tried to calm them, but frustrations spiraled. Rebecca's old wounds reopened, Clarissa's insecurities roared to life, and David found himself at a loss watching the dinner unravel. They ended the night in awkward silence, each retreating to private doubts. In the aftermath, David knew they needed outside help. He began attending solo therapy to confront his guilt and clarify his feelings. He also suggested co-parenting counseling with Rebecca, hoping it would provide tools to handle their complicated dynamic, although wary she agreed for Lily's sake. Over weeks of guided sessions, David and Rebecca revisited the root issues of their marriage, his workaholic tendencies, her simmering resentments, and their mutual inability to communicate openly. Their sessions were painful yet cathartic, offering a chance to heal. Slowly they fashioned a truce built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to Lily. Once they emerged from therapy, David had clarity about his desires. He wanted to be a devoted father to Lily, while maintaining a loving relationship with Clarissa. He met with Rebecca privately. "I'll always treasure what we had," he said, voice trembling. "But I'm committed to Clarissa. I hope we can move forward as co-parents and friends." Rebecca, tears glistening, nodded. "I just want Lily to grow up surrounded by love." Clarissa, meanwhile, had her own reckoning. She realized being with David meant accepting a life where Rebecca was forever present. Despite the unease, she deeply loved David, the determined entrepreneur, the adoring father who wept at Lily's first cries. Summoning her courage, she chose to remain. Over time, she and Rebecca reached a tentative peace, exchanging cordial messages about Lily's needs, even meeting for short coffee chats. Their civility was fragile but genuine, united by a desire to give Lily the best possible environment. Months passed. Lily's first birthday arrived, and David spared no expense, hosting a warm yet stylish party at a scenic park. Clarissa planned the decorations, while Rebecca baked a small smash cake. Family friends gathered around Lily's high chair, snapping photos of her giggling at the colorful balloons. In that moment, David felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. Here he stood with his ex-wife, his girlfriend, and his precious daughter, an unconventional tableau, yet bound by a sense of shared purpose. Toward the end of the celebration, David tapped the microphone to thank everyone. Emotions laced his voice. "This year has been the most transformative of my life. I learned that real success isn't in deals or bank accounts, but in the people who stand by you. I want to thank Rebecca for blessing me with Lily and Clarissa for giving me love and understanding." Applause resonated through the park, some onlookers dabbing away tears. As the guests filtered out, David approached Rebecca and Clarissa, who stood near the gift table. Lily snoozed happily in Rebecca's arms. "Thank you both," he said quietly, emotional, for being patient, for believing in second chances. Rebecca offered a soft smile, glancing down at Lily. Clarissa rested a hand on David's shoulder. Though their relationships were complex, they had forged a path founded on mutual respect, co-parenting harmony, and a redefined sense of family. Thus, the night David took his new girlfriend to La Chanson, only to discover his pregnant ex-wife working there, ended up being the collision of past and present that none of them could have predicted. Amid the swirl of public scrutiny and private heartbreak, they learned that genuine wealth lies not in status or prestige, but in the tender bonds we nurture with those we love. And in the end, that unexpected dinner became the doorway to a deeper understanding of commitment, forgiveness, and the fragile, precious ties that unite us all. After heartbreak, shocking revelations, and an emotional journey to co-parenting, David, Clarissa, and Rebecca discovered that life rarely follows a perfect script. True strength lies in facing the past healing wounds and creating a future shaped by empathy and love. Baby Lily became a beacon of hope, bridging their differences with each shared moment. Though their dynamic is unconventional, it's united by a common purpose to nurture a life born of faith and perseverance. We hope you find inspiration in their journey. If this story resonated, please show your support. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Your engagement helps us bring you stories of real-life drama, resilience, and hope. Thank you for watching and for being part of this journey. Let's spread the power of compassion one story at a time.